Hello and welcome to the channel. Hillbilly Military Modeling here, and we are going to continue our CSS H.L. Hunley by MikroMir in 1/35 scale. This video will be our painting, weathering, and a final reveal at the end, so you don't want to miss that. So let's go ahead and get started here. First thing we need to do is prepare the model for paint. Now I've already gone over the model with a little bit of rubbing alcohol to make sure that there's no dust left on the model or any residual oils from my hands from handling it. And the next thing we're going to do is going to have to make a cradle for this submarine. Seeing how the vessel is kind of round with a slight flat on the bottom of it, it's quite probable that I'll roll this thing over in the paint booth. we don't want to be doing that. So I'm taking this dollar sponge from the dollar store, and we're just going to slice us off a piece of it here, and I'm going to cut a little wedge out of the center, and that should securely hold the model for us so it doesn't roll over while we're spraying our paint. And it's a good idea to go ahead and test it out, make sure that it'll securely hold the model so that we don't damage anything while we're trying to paint. Next thing, we're going to take and put those little round masks over the portals on the hatches. Now I've already done that, and you can barely see that it's actually there, but that's got it prepared for paint. So the first color we're going to use on our model is we're going to paint the entire sub white. And you're probably saying, why are you going to paint it white? Because the Hunley is actually supposed to be black. But you're going to have to trust me here. it's going to work out fine. So we want to lay down a nice even coat of this Vallejo white primer. And I did thin it just for my airbrush. You'll have to play with yours. I never do get white quite right for spraying, but we manage it in this one. Just make sure that we're going to cover everything on the model, and that'll give us our nice base color. So I did have a little bit of run here, this submarine being so long. I got the airbrush too close to the propeller guard here, and so we're going to have to take care of that. And the way I do that, I'm going to use this buffing stick here. Now this is a 3200 grit. Anything up to 4 to 6,000 would be fine as well. And I'm just going to lightly buff out this paint sag where I got the airbrush too close to the model. Now there are a couple of other defects in the paint that we're going to take care of with this buffing stick. A little bit of built-up paint on the needle of the airbrush has blown a couple of particles here and there. So we're going to buff those out as well. And that buffed out, pretty nice. It's nice and smooth now. So we shouldn't have any defects in our overall paint job from that. So next up, we're going to use this German Panzer Gray, which is a really, really dark gray, almost black. I'm going to mix some white in it, and we're going to come up with a medium gray. And this is all Vallejo paint. Now I did use a couple of post-it notes here because I need to paint the inside of the propeller guard. We don't want any white showing through there, so I need to go ahead and get that painted up on the inside. And the post-it notes will keep us from a lot of overspray onto the body of the sub. That way that won't interfere with the next step, which is, with the post-it notes removed, we're going to go ahead and start doing some shading. Here I'm going to start down next to the propeller, and we're going to just shade around the areas that protrude out from the stern of the sub. I got to think of all my nautical terms. You Navy guys, you can correct me later. And then we're going to come up and start doing the panel lines. Now if you're a aircraft modeler, this will be probably something that you're used to doing, appreciating panel lines and rivet detail and stuff like that. And it's really no different. So we just want to make sure we're going to keep it as tight as possible with our spray here, and just catch these details. I do this spraying with the protective cup removed from my airbrush. That allows me to get in a little bit tighter. As you can see, I do a lot of cleaning on the tip. You don't want paint to build up on the needle, because that will come loose and you'll have a big blob of paint right on your painted surface, and then you'll have to fix that, and we don't want to do that, so we're going to keep it nice and clean. So here I have a stencil, and I'm going to use this on these large white panels here on the body of the sub. What this is going to do is give us some detail when we go to lay our primary color and our final coat over top of all this pre-shading. It'll add visual interest, and I know that's something that you hear a lot, visual interest, but I gotta be honest with you, I really like the effect here. So the trick is to keep flipping and changing what sections on the stencil that you're using. That way all the panels don't look exactly alike. If you just use one little area, it'll be repetitious, and we don't want that. We want it to be random. So once we have all that done, this is what it looks like. So you can still see the white, and then we have our random patterns of pre-shading. So I am dipping into the medium gray paint that we use to paint our panel lines and do our little details there. And we're going to go back and paint inside of all of our portals, because some of that didn't get sprayed up on the inside. We don't want any white to come through once we install the portals. Well, actually, yeah, I guess install is a good word for it. So we just need to make sure we got our base gray in there. So next up is going to be the top coat of paint, and I'm going to go back to this German Panzer gray again, because if we use black, you're not going to be able to see a lot of detail. And so what I really want to do is I really want to just start lightly coating in the surface of the sub, and we're going to take several passes over it. And as you can see, I'm still using the airbrush without the protective cup on the needle. That way I can keep the tip clean, and I can keep control of where I'm putting the paint. So we're going to make several passes on the sub in order to get the right color saturation. Actually, gray is not a color, it's a shade, so I guess it's the right shade saturation. Now the key here is to make sure that we stop right before we think we need to do one more coat. Otherwise it will get so opaque that our pre-shading is not going to show through, and we don't want to do that, because we still got a couple other operations to do here on the hull, and we don't want to get rid of all this pre-shading. We want that definition to really show through. Here we're going to use the flat brass, and we're going to use that on this, I guess it's called a mine. I'm not real sure. Yeah, I think it's referred to as a mine. This is the canister that holds all the black powder. So that's the explosive charge that's supposed to sink the ship. So we're going to carefully paint that with the flat brass. And we're also going to use our flat brass on the propeller of the sub. Now, originally, I believe the propeller was just iron, I believe it was just painted black. But in this particular case, since everything is so dark on this sub, I thought it would be a nice color addition if we would paint that flat brass as well. That way everything's not black. So, well, in this case it's German Panzer Gray, but you get the picture there. So I forgot to drill a hole in our charge, our mine. And we're going to need that hole when we go to put the rope on it that triggers the charge. So went ahead and drilled that now. Now after we've done all that, we're going to take this X22 clear from Tamiya. Going to mix it with a little bit of X20A thinner for the airbrush. And we spray everything down. Now we're going to come in and use this brown panel liner here to accent the all the rivets and these panel lines that's on the sub. But I will caution you, make sure that you allow the Tamiya X22 to dry. I let it dry overnight because I knew I was going to be using some thinners on it, and I didn't want to have any problems with it. Since the X22 Tamiya acrylic is a kind of a solvent base, you can't have issues if you don't let it cure completely, well, which I've had. So we're just going to eliminate that. So once all of our panel liner has dried, I'm going to come in with this Tester's thinner, and we're going to do some light cleanup. Now, since the panel liner is an enamel base, then the enamel thinner will help us clean up any little ugly spots that we got here. Just make sure that the brush is just slightly damp with thinner. And we're going to take and just pull down on these panels. Not really worried a whole lot about cleaning up all of it or getting all the off the top of the panel. We just pull it down a little bit and that'll suffice. Now once we get all these panels cleaned up, we'll be ready for the next step. So now it's time to use a little bit of this AK Interactive Rush Streaks, and we are going to use that on these ports that are on the side of the sub. And this is where they pumped in and pumped out their ballast water, I guess it is. I'm not a sub guy, so I can't tell you for sure whether it's called ballast or not. Anyway, by adding more water to the weight of the sub, allowed the sub to submerge. So this sub was in and out of the water quite a bit. So I imagine there had been little rush streaks here. We are just cleaning up with a fine brush here and a little bit of thinner. So the next thing we're going to do is use this Tester's Clear Parts Cement and Window Maker, and we're going to just put a little bit here on a piece of cardboard. That way I can dip my toothpick into it. So we're going to start this process of making the glass for our portals by dipping a toothpick into the window maker, and we're just going to line the inside of the portal. So what we're doing is actually building up the window maker, and as you can see, it's starting to get a little thicker, and then there it is. It'll just pull right together and we have a portal. So we'll go ahead and do another one here. So you want to make sure that it contacts all the way around the inside of the portal, and it's almost there, a little bit more, and there we go. So once we get all of our portals done, it's time to remove the mask off the portals on the hatch, and that's both hatches. We have a front and a rear hatch. This is the rear one. and it is kind of stubborn. It didn't really want to come off, but eventually we do get that to come off of there. Now I do chip the paint just a little bit here with these tweezers, so I'm going to have to come back in with a little bit of our Panzer Gray and just fix that little chip, and I do that with a toothpick. There we go, we got it off finally. So I didn't do a very good job of fitting our spar to the front of the sub here, so I did have to modify it a little bit, but we'll touch that up. So next up we're going to do some rigging. There are cables that allow the sub commander to change the angle of the spar for attacking a ship. So I just cut off a piece of this nylon thread, and we are going to super glue it to the spar, and we're going to use this medium super glue to do that. And I always like to put the super glue on a little piece of cardboard, and then I can control where I put it with a toothpick. So a little bit of glue onto the spar, and then it's time to bring the thread into contact with it. Now since it is medium contact super glue, it doesn't set right away. It gives us time to work with whatever it is that you're gluing with it. And here we're going to do 2 or 3 wraps of the thread. And once we get all that into place and the glue sets off, we'll be ready for the next step, which is to go ahead and thread it through the hole in the top of the bow. And so we're going to pull this thread through, and we're just going to bring it down back to the connection point here on the spar, and we're going to glue that in place. Now with a few wraps on it, we'll go ahead and secure the tails of the rigging with super glue. Now I'll also go ahead and pretty much do the same thing with the rope that goes to our mine on the end of the spar. We just have to wrap it around the spool, glue it in place, and then glue it in the hole on the back of the mine. So now we're going to turn our attention to our base, and so we're going to try to do some wood grain here. That should be interesting. So here's our plastic base, and I've already glued the brackets on it. I'm going to use this double stick tape from 3M and make us a little jig to hold our base. That way we don't have to touch the base with our fingers. And we just stick it right to the very bottom of it there. We need a base color for our wood graining that we're going to do here, so we're going to use this German dark yellow and mix it up for our airbrush and just spray the base with that. And now we're going to come in with some burnt umber, crimson, and ivory black. Now I'll put this on cardboard and let it set for 6 or 7 hours, I think, to soak out most of the linseed oil. And now I'm going to use some enamel thinner as a carrier, and we're just going to cover the entire base with this. Now I've mixed just a little bit of the crimson with our burnt umber and kind of give it a little bit of a reddish tint. So we just we want to cover this. I obviously chose the wrong brush to do this, but just cover the entire base with it. And we want to cover up all of the German dark yellow. So I do let this dry for about 5 minutes, and then I come back in with this hard bristle brush. You could probably use a stenciling brush as well. This brush just lets me get in close to these brackets. As you can see, this would have been an easier operation had I not put those brackets on there. But we're just using the enamel thinner and this stiff brush to put the wood graining in. So be a little creative with it, you know, don't put it all straight, you know, just curves here and there. It'll look good in the end, don't worry. And what these bristles do is they collect the paint and allows some of that German dark yellow to show through, giving us our graining effect. And once we get done with that, we let it dry just a little bit, and then I'll come back in with the ivory black. And I kind of made me a little cove here in the center. I just put a little knot there, give a little bit of visual interest there on our base. Probably won't be able to see it, but it's in there. And you can use enamel thinner just to kind of blend it in on the edges. And here I come in with the enamel thinner. Lightly blend it. You don't want to remove your burnt umber and crimson. It's easy for me to say. There we go. That kind of looks like wood. So the next thing we're going to do is, once that dries, and you can use a hair dryer to dry it up, speed the process. And I seal everything with the X22 clear. Next we're going to use this brass tester's enamel, and we're just going to paint our brackets with that. Now the thing about enamels is they take a long time to dry, so I did this in the evening and I just didn't mess with it anymore. I let it dry until the next day. So it's very important that you do that, because enamels can be soft. After it's completely dry, I go back in and I end up, I didn't like how the X22 looked on that, so I use the Model Masters Acryl Flat Clear and coated it in flat. And then there we are. Our model is done. So this is the CSS H.L. Hunley, finally complete. Actually, it's a pretty quick build. One of the things is in the build process, the filling of the hull halves, especially right there between the portals on the top center section of the hull. That was a bit of a pain, and having to, you know, make the rivets to fix that. Other than that, the rest of it really wasn't that bad. And this was the first time that I've done the photo etch. So I learned some things doing the photo etch. And as with all these kits, that's the whole point. We want to learn and keep going and keep expanding our knowledge on how to build models. And I hope you can see the detail in the paint with the pre-shading, giving interest to a submarine that had originally been painted black. And I'm really glad that we didn't paint this thing black, because you wouldn't be able to see any detail on it. So I think it came out pretty good. Let me know in the comments what you think of this build. I'd appreciate that. I'd like to hear from you. And if you're new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any other videos. And I'd like to thank all my subscribers. I really appreciate you guys. It's because of you and your interest in my model building that I continue to put out these videos, and I'll continue to do so as long as you guys like them. So let me know what you think of the build. I really enjoyed it. You guys stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.